then the last one is an increasing sense of alienation and distrust brought on by British stubbornness and colonial hotheads rhetoric. Okay, so here's how this works. What happens is that the British will do something like they'll impose a tax, right? And then the Americans will say, I'm not going to pay your stupid tax. And then the British will say, well, you're going to pay the tax or else. And they send military to enforce the tax, right? And the more the British clamp down on what Americans feel are their rights, the more the Americans will resist, right? So it's kind of like if you can think about, let's say we have a kid, right? And this kid is living in a suburban family, have a mother and father, and the kid, right? And the mother and father, because it's 21st century America, they both have to work full time in order to support the family, right? So the mother and father are working full time, and the kid essentially is raising himself. Okay, the kid is what do they call them? Latchkey kids, where they go to school and then they come home and they get in and they do their homework or whatever, and feed themselves and those sorts of things, and they're pretty independent, and they develop the sense of independence, right? And then what happens is that they get in trouble. They fall in with a bad crowd in high school, and they end up getting caught tagging something or whatever, right? And they get picked up by the police and they're brought down to the police station, and then the parents are called in, and the parents come and they say, okay, well, we're really going to crack down now, right? And you're grounded, and you have a curfew, and you can only do certain things, and I'm going to take away your Game Boy and whatever, right? You guys get what I'm saying, right? You guys don't even have Game Boys anymore, do you? But anyway, the point here is it's a switch now, I think, isn't it? The point here is anyway that you as a kid, you're going to say, hey, wait a minute. I've been raising myself all this time, and you didn't pay any attention to me at all. And now all of a sudden you think that you have a right to crack down on me. You can't tell me what to do. I've been living my life on my own all this time. Where were you when I needed you before, right? And then the parents say, well, that may be true, but this is our house, and as long as you live under our roof, you're going to go by our rules. And the kid says, well, screw you then. I'm not going to go by your rules. And stomps to the front door and walks out and slams the front door, right? You guys are with me? And that's exactly that's exactly how you can, what's the word I'm looking for? That's how you can characterize the relationship between Britain and America, right? The metaphor, I guess you could say, for the relationship between America and Britain was that Britain was the mother country, and that America was the kids, right? And then we'll see, for example, we won't read it, but we'll see Thomas Paine in his Call to Arms, Common Sense, is going to say, well, what kind of a mother would treat their kids like this, right? And you're going to see that Americans will really think in these terms of being grown up, that we don't need a parent anymore, right? You guys get what I'm saying? And it's going to be because of this really the British stubbornness, the British Parliament insisting that they have a right to enforce their colonial rule in America, and not being willing to negotiate or to compromise. And on the other hand, the Americans are going to be just as stubborn, just as closed-minded. They'll be driven by people who want to portray everything that the British do in the worst possible light, right? So I think it's something that we should be familiar with, because nowadays, I mean, if you look at, for example, turn on one of the news channels, and they'll be telling you about how screwed up all the other guys are, right? You follow what I'm saying? And they'll, whatever they do, they'll say, "Well, see, that's how stupid they are," right? And that's what the Americans do. The Americans will say, "Well, look what the British did here." Right, and that's tyranny, and we should break away from them. That's going to eventually lead to the break. Okay, now I can give you an example here, and we'll talk more about it on Monday or Wednesday. Sorry, and that is the tea tax. Right, the tea tax. The reason for the tea tax was because the British were invested in India, in tea from India, and all of the trade with India was controlled by a private company called the British East India Company. And this company was going broke. Okay, and many people believe that if the company went into bankruptcy, that would ruin the British economy. All right, it was kind of like when you think today about companies that are too big to fail. Right? Too big to fail. Like if we allow GM to fail, it'll tank the American economy, right? So we're going to prop it up, and that's what the Parliament decides to do. And the way that they're going to do it is they're going to essentially insist that everybody in America buy tea from the British East India Company. And the way that you'll know that the Americans have bought that tea is that they'll pay a tax, right? Okay, but the problem is, well, excuse me, let me go a little bit further and say that the caveat is that the British, even though they're insisting that you buy tea from the British East India Company, they're saying that you can get it really cheap. So they figure the Americans will really like this because they're going to get cheap tea, and everybody drinks tea, right? Okay, so the idea then is that we're gonna force you to buy this tea, but we're going to give it to you really cheap, and that should make everybody happy, and that'll save the British East India Company, right? But Americans are going to say, look what they're doing. These tyrants are telling us we can't even choose our own tea. We have to buy tea that only from them, right? You see what I'm saying? And so even though the British are trying to do some, they're thinking about ways that they may be able to they may be able to make things easier for Americans. Americans are not going to believe it. Americans are going to believe that everything that the British are doing is tyranny, and eventually it will lead to a position where there has to be a break. There is no room anymore for discussion or compromise. So there's these 4 points that come out of the Great War for Empire that will set the stage for the American Revolution.